Imagine writing a book that is so dangerous that it essentially invents the modern novel, infuriates the established church, outrages the literary elite, and then
Centuries later.
exactly. A couple of centuries later, it serves as a literal blueprint for anti-colonial rebellion halfway across the world.
It is wild.
And the wildest part is the author wraps all of this like massive systemic subversion inside this giant sprawling comedy about a guy who just, he cannot seem to keep his pants on.
It sounds like a total contradiction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You have this incredibly dense political and social commentary, completely camouflaged by, well, tavern brawls, mistaken identities, bedroom farces.
Yeah.
But that camouflage is exactly what makes the text so lethal as a cultural weapon.
Today we are going back to 1747 to dissect Henry Fielding's masterpiece, Tom Jones. And for those of you listening right now, whether you are, staring down a massive exam on this book, prepping to write a seminar paper, or you just want to understand one of the most pivotal pieces of literature ever published, this deep dive is custom tailored for you. Yep. We have a massive stack of academic study units right in front of us. We are going to tear down the socio-cultural mechanics, the feminist undercurrents, and the hidden geographical mapping of this novel.
There's so much to cover.
There really is. By the time this audio wraps, you will understand the deep machinery grinding away beneath the surface of this story, and you will be completely prepared to ace whatever test or debate you walk into.
Because the stakes with this book are just so much higher than just following the plot of a famous foundling.
Right?
When Fielding published Tom Jones, he was taking a burgeoning, somewhat disrespected medium prose and turning it into an instrument for radical questioning. He forces the reader to look at how individuals are supposed to survive when the institutions built to protect them are, well, fundamentally corrupt and hypocritical.
Okay, let's unpack this. If we want to understand how Tom Jones operates, we really have to look at the soil it grew out of. Like, we need to look at what media even was in the early 18th century.
Right, which was totally different.
Completely.
Yeah.
And how fiction basically had to masquerade as a new kind of history.
What's fascinating here is if we roll the clock back to the 17th century, prose was simply not considered a medium for serious, imaginative, creative work.
Not at all.
If a writer wanted to explore high morality or philosophy or human tragedy, they used verse.
Yeah.
They wrote epic poetry. They wrote poetic drama. Prose was for ledgers.
It was for math.
Exactly. It was for sermons. It was for utilitarian communication.
Because the audience for, real literature was microscopic. It was this elite, highly educated club of aristocrats just passing manuscripts around.
It was a medium designed by and for the selected few, dealing with these elevated abstract ideals. But as we move into the 18th century, England undergoes this massive tectonic socio-political churning. The middle class rises.
And we have to be very specific about who these people were. They weren't born into it. They were commoners who had dragged themselves up by sheer brute force industry and labor.
Right.
And the documentation on this shift in our sources is fascinating, specifically regarding the role of women.
Oh, this is huge.
Because we tend to picture the rise of the middle class as a bunch of men in counting houses wearing powdered wigs, right?
Right, like Ebenezer Scrooge types.
Exactly.
Right.
But the reality is that women were the engine of this new economic reality. These were women who were managing massive manufacturing operations.
They were busy.
Extremely. They were negotiating for raw materials, managing unruly artisans, balancing complex financial books, and making sure goods actually sold at the market.
So their daily lives were incredibly complex, highly negotiated, and rooted in the very pragmatic physical realities of money and trade.
Yeah.
So when these women, and this new middle class in general, finally had a moment of leisure to read, they did not want soaring abstract verse about a mythological king conquering a dragon.
No, they didn't care about dragons.
They demanded a reflection of their own existence.
They wanted the language of the market, the street, the inn. They wanted dialogue. This was a class of people who spent all day talking, arguing, and hashing out contracts. They needed media that sounded like them.
Right.
It actually feels incredibly similar to the media shift we've lived through recently. Think about the transition from highly produced, multi-million-dollar, incredibly polished elite cinema to, the raw, conversational, unscripted format of vloggers or independent deep dives like this.
That is a great comparison.
People suddenly got the technology to say, hey, I want media that talks about my daily life, my actual problems, without all the artificial polish. It's the democratization of media for a rising class.
And that democratization in the 18th century gave birth to the periodical. You suddenly see the streets of London flooded with magazines, pamphlets, broadsheets aimed directly at the average city dweller.
Yeah.
Because previously, if a lower-class person wanted moral guidance, they had to go to the village parson and sit through a dry sermon.
Which was probably incredibly boring.
Exactly. Now, this literate, urban middle-class reader wanted moral guidance mixed with pleasure, delivered directly to their doorstep by a secular agency.
Right.
The early novel essentially hijacked these traits from the periodical. It became a tool to provide a no-nonsense, pragmatic understanding of how to navigate society.
But Fielding pushes this, so much further. He creates this really strange distinction between poetry, history, and this brand new concept of fiction.
He really does.
Because poetry is an imaginative flight of the soul, it's untethered, but the novel is a realistic mirror of mundane survival, how to secure your bread and butter. Yet it's still entirely invented. It's a fabrication.
Which is a paradox.
Yeah. There is this brilliant analogy in our notes that compares a fiction writer to a compulsive liar.
I love that analogy so much. If you observe someone who is a pathological compulsive liar, you realize they are engaging in highly sophisticated social monitoring.
Yeah, they're not just babbling.
No, they don't just spout a random falsehood. They carefully watch the faces of their audience. They track pupil dilation, microexpressions, shifts in posture. They are figuring out exactly what the listener's psychological needs are, and they modify the lie in real time to fit those needs.
So fiction is technically a non-fact. It's a lie. But unlike a malicious scam designed to steal your money, poetry and drama, and this new form of the novel, are trying to deliver high truths.
Exactly.
The irony is thick here. By inventing a total fabrication, by lying to the reader about people who never even existed, the novelist actually reveals the deepest, most accurate truths of an ordinary life situation.
And Fielding leans into this tension heavily. He insists over and over in the text that he is writing a history. He draws on the tradition of factual historical writing that was very popular at the time. Texts like Lord Clarendon's History of the Rebellion.
Right, or William Dampier's A New Voyage Around the World.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fielding takes the gravitas and the structural authority of those factual histories and applies them to ordinary invented life. He elevates the everyday struggle of a bastard child into a significant history.
But wait, how does a novel actually differ from history mechanically? Because if he's claiming to write history, actual history doesn't have narrative arcs.
No, it doesn't.
It just keeps happening. It's a continuous, endless process of events crashing into each other with no clear beginning and no real end.
And that is the crucial intervention the novelist makes. History is a massive, chaotic continuum. A novel has a very specific page 1 and a very specific final page, chosen deliberately by the author.
Right.
Why does the author carve out that exact segment of time? To deliver a fable, to construct a tangible moral lesson. In actual history, moral lessons are messy, contradictory, and, well, often invisible.
Yeah, historians get accused of intense bias if they try to neatly package events into a moral fable.
Exactly. But the novelist owns their creation completely. They have total, godlike flexibility to shape the narrative, bend the events, and force the characters into situations that make a specific philosophical point.
And one of the most dangerous philosophical points Fielding decides to make revolves around marriage.
Oh, this was explosive at the time.
Because the 17th century elite viewed marriage purely as a political, dynastic transaction. It was a merger and acquisition. You married to consolidate estates, acquire titles, lock in power. Love was completely irrelevant.
Right? It was just business.
But for this rising 18th century middle class, marriage suddenly becomes a matter of individual choice. It becomes about ethics, compatibility, affection.
Which turns marriage into a form of rebellion against entrenched privilege. If two young people from different social strata decide to marry based on mutual affection, they are fundamentally rejecting the values of the orthodox establishment.
Yeah.
They are saying that individual human worth matters more than dynastic bloodlines.
If the novel is a mirror of this massive societal shift toward individual choice, we have to look at the specific individuals Fielding created to populate this world. And this is where the academic analysis gets incredibly dense.
It really does.
We need to talk about characters as characterizations. The study units pull in critics like Arnold Kettle, who separates characters into life versus pattern, and Georg Lukics, who uses the term concrete Typicality?
That's a mouthful.
It really is. I'm struggling with this concrete typicality idea. If they aren't real people, is Tom Jones just a walking billboard for an idea? What is he actually doing in the story that proves he's just a pattern?
Think of it less like a billboard and more like a highly detailed archetype. When Lukács talks about concrete typicality, he means that a character breathes, sweats, and has very specific quirks. They are concrete,
Okay.
but they ultimately typify the larger social, economic, and historical forces of their era. You aren't meant to put them on a psychiatrist's couch and analyze their childhood trauma. You are meant to read them as symbols of broader social behavior.
I get it.
If we use a modern equivalent, think of the tech bro or the corporate ladder climber. They are individuals, but they represent a massive socioeconomic shift.
Okay, so applying that to Tom Jones, the bastard protagonist, he is the ultimate unformed clay. He symbolizes spontaneity, natural behavior, pure, uninhibited impulse.
Yes.
He operates on the principle that if something feels naturally good and kind, he should do it. But because he is pure impulse, he completely lacks rational discipline. He doesn't understand the rigid, hypocritical codes of the society he lives in.
And because he doesn't understand those codes, he is constantly colliding with them. Society demands prudence, calculation, and the maintenance of appearances. Tom possesses absolutely none of those.
None.
He's utterly incapable of hypocrisy.
But this is where I always get tripped up when reading the plot. If Tom is so naturally good, why is he constantly making such a massive mess of his life? I mean, he sleeps around, he gets into massive tavern brawls, he gets kicked out of his home. If he's the moral center of the book, isn't he just a remarkably bad decision maker?
That tension is exactly where Fielding's social critique lives. Tom is only uninnocent or bad if you judge him by the strict, hypocritical standards of 18th century high society.
Oh, I see.
Fielding uses Tom's flaws, his impulsiveness, his lack of sexual prudence, to expose the absolute falseness of a system that values outward appearances over genuine active benevolence.
Because Tom actually helps people.
Yes, Tom will literally risk his own neck, give away his last penny, or take a beating to save a friend. But polite society condemns him because he was born out of wedlock and drinks too much at the pub. Fielding is asking the reader, who is actually a better human being, the messy kid who helps the poor, or the polite gentleman who lets them starve?
Which perfectly introduces Master Blifil. Blifil is the legitimate heir. He is the exact opposite of Tom's concrete typicality.
He's the absolute worst.
He really is. Blifil follows every single rule.
Yeah.
He speaks in beautifully constructed, pious, moralistic sentences. He is an absolute master of appearances.
But underneath that pristine surface, Blifil is entirely corrupt. He is manipulative, cold, calculating. He operates like a machine of fate designed to destroy Tom.
Yeah.
And he objectifies women completely. He views Sophia Western not as a human being with a soul, but purely as an adjacent piece of property that will increase his real estate portfolio once he marries her.
Gross.
Very. Blifil hates Tom, precisely because Tom's natural, uncalculated goodness is a living threat to Blifil's calculated hypocrisy. If Tom's morality is right, Blifil's entire existence is a fraud.
But Tom isn't fighting Blifil alone. We have to bring Sophia Western into this equation because she is far more than just a damsel in distress waiting for Tom to get his act together.
Right.
The analysis emphasizes her deep inner life. She possesses incredible discipline and a profound capacity for introspection.
She is the necessary rational anchor to Tom's chaotic naturalness. If Tom is pure spontaneity, Sophia is rational self-appraisal.
Right.
She is trapped in a horrific situation, living in a society that explicitly treats her as chattel under the control of a father who just wants to trade her away. But she utterly refuses to surrender her mind. When she is faced with the prospect of being forced to marry Blifil, she explicitly declares she would rather plunge a dagger into her own heart. She is a fiercely thinking individual struggling against systemic doom.
They are two halves of a whole. Tom needs her rational discipline to keep his chaotic energy from getting him killed or thrown in prison forever.
Exactly.
And she needs his natural goodness and rebellious vitality to escape the suffocating, death-like hypocrisy of her world. Without him, she is locked in a cage. Without her, he basically runs off a cliff.
That dynamic of balance is mirrored, or rather, the failure of that balance is mirrored, perfectly in the older generation. We have to examine the two great patriarchs of the novel, Squire Allworthy and Squire Western.
Oh, these two.
Yeah, they represent two completely broken models of patriarchal power. Let's start with Allworthy. He is Mr. Good. He's the moral, benevolent, highly educated Christian magistrate.
But he is completely isolated. He sits on this high, literal and metaphorical pedestal on his country estate, constantly preaching these abstract, lofty principles. But he is entirely detached from common action. He doesn't know how the real world actually functions.
Because he is detached, he frequently and disastrously misjudges situations. He judges everyone based on his own internal reason and kind intentions. He assumes everyone else is operating in good faith.
Which they aren't.
No, not at all. Because he doesn't engage with the messy, deceptive reality of human nature, he is incredibly easy to manipulate. Blifil plays him like a fiddle.
There is this one scene that just captures Allworthy's failure perfectly. It's a masterclass in dramatic irony. Early in the book, Allworthy summons Jenny Jones, who he mistakenly believes is Tom's mother, to lecture her. And he delivers this massive, pompous, deeply earnest Christian sermon about the heinous nature of her crime of unchastity. He goes on, completely unaware that he does not know the truth of Tom's parentage at all. He is so blinded by his own abstract moral code and so confident in his authority that he cannot see the complex reality standing right in front of him.
Yeah, contrast that detached abstraction with Squire Western. If Allworthy is the mind completely disconnected from the body, Western is the body completely disconnected from the mind.
He's a menace.
He is pure, untamed, beastly energy. He is a wealthy member of the landed gentry, but he behaves like a feral animal. He is impulsive, violently unpredictable, and a massive misogynist who explicitly treats his daughter Sophia as a piece of property to be traded for hunting lands.
Yet Fielding complicates him, because Western is also Tom's hunting buddy. They share a certain raw physical vitality. When they are out riding, there is a natural bond. But Western's energy is entirely uneducated, crude, and ultimately destructive.
If the adults in the room are either hopelessly detached, like Allworthy, or feral animals like Western, who's actually teaching the next generation, how are Tom and Blifil supposed to learn the rules of this complex new society?
Well, they hire tutors. But this is where Fielding gets incredibly cynical. The two men hired to educate the boys are Square and Thwackum. And while they are written as comic relief, they are deeply sinister. They represent the absolute mechanization of principles.
Square is the secular atheist philosopher. He judges every single action by this rigid mathematical concept he calls the rule of right.
Right.
Thwackum is the religious clergyman who judges everything by strict, punishing religious dogma. They're opposites in theory, but identical in practice. They both offer these simple, predictable, prepackaged views of the world without ever actually pondering the nuance or complexity of human life.
And their hypocrisy isn't just theoretical, it's predatory. They both actively try to woo Allworthy's sister, Bridget, not because they have any genuine affection for her, but because they want access to her money and the power of the Allworthy estate. They take their grand, supposedly noble philosophies and reduce them to cheap tools for social climbing and sexual manipulation.
Which perfectly demonstrates Fielding's point. Abstract education, when it is divorced from natural, empathetic goodness, just becomes a weapon for exploitation. Square and Thwackum, combined with Blifil's conspiratorial skills, form a dangerous, calculated machine that almost completely destroys Tom.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The fact that they target Bridget Allworthy brings us to a massive, crucial, thematic pillar of the text. We cannot dissect Tom Jones without talking about how this male-dominated society utterly traps women, but also how those women strategically manipulate the trap to survive.
This is such a critical part of the study guide.
It is. The academic units make a very strong case that Fielding is a surprisingly pro-woman writer. He recognizes that the 18th century marriage market was a socioeconomic tool specifically designed to subjugate women under a highly restrictive patriarchal code of conduct.
Fielding gives us a vast spectrum of female representation, showing how women from different social strata develop distinct survival strategies. Let's look at Bridget Allworthy. She's unmarried, not conventionally beautiful, and highly intelligent.
Yeah.
She sees right through the patriarchal sycophancy of men like Square and Thwackum. She knows they're only after her wealth.
So she completely flips the script on them. She cleverly manipulates them, reducing these arrogant scholars to abject, pathetic seekers of her favor. But her ultimate act of rebellion is her secret, dignified romance with a man named Summer.
Right.
She uses her societal position to outweight the patriarchal system entirely, claiming her own sexual agency in secret while maintaining her public respectability.
Then we drop down the social ladder to Molly Seagram. Molly represents a completely different strategy: aggressive, raw, animalistic female sexuality. She unapologetically seduces Tom and completely rejects the era's prudish hypocrisy.
Which was shocking to readers.
Totally shocking. What is vital here is that Fielding does not judge Molly harshly for this. He doesn't write her as a villain. He sees her raw, unapologetic vitality as a completely natural, logical response to a world that offers a poor woman almost zero options for survival or pleasure.
On the extreme opposite end of the spectrum, we have Lady Bellaston. She is the epitome of the cynical, bored London elite. She has massive wealth and untouchable social power, but she is morally bankrupt.
She is just awful.
She uses her resources to literally trap Tom, trying to force him to be her kept lover.
But underneath her calculated, predatory exterior, she is driven by a profound, agonizing jealousy of Sophia's genuine, dignified love. Lady Bellaston's promiscuity isn't natural or vital like Molly's. It is a sick, routinized behavior born out of the extreme stagnation and boredom of the upper class. She's just consuming people to feel something.
And finally, we have Jenny Jones, who later operates under the name Mrs. Waters. Her trajectory is perhaps the most tragic yet resilient in the entire novel.
It's heartbreaking.
It really is. She begins as a highly intelligent maid. The text notes her intellect surpasses almost everyone in Somersetshire. But a rigidly patriarchal society simply cannot handle a brilliant, lower-class woman. It has no place for her.
None.
Through a series of betrayals and exploitations, she is expelled from her home and degrades into a desperate woman moving with the army, just trying to stay alive.
Which leads to that harrowing scene at the Upton Inn.
Ooh.
It captures her horrific reality perfectly.
Tom finds her half-naked, actively being attacked by a ruffian who is literally trying to hang her from a tree.
Yeah.
It's a brutal, terrifying moment.
Yeah.
But the second Tom rescues her, the very moment she is safe from immediate death, she pivots. She immediately uses her sexuality to seduce Tom. The critical analysis argues this isn't because she is inherently wicked, it's because society has forcibly stripped her of her intellect, which was her first phase of life, and forced her into an animalistic, hypervigilant survivalist mode.
Exactly. She uses the only currency society has left her with.
This systemic exploitation brings us to a brilliant concept explored in the study units, the metaphor of poaching.
I love this part of the analysis.
It's so good. Fielding uses poaching not just as a plot device, but as a multi-layered metaphor to expose how individuals trespass on each other's fundamental rights. But wait, how does the text actually do this? Break down how poaching works mechanically in the story.
It operates on 4 distinct levels. First, you have literal poaching. Early in the book, Tom goes on to Squire Western's land to poach partridges. But he doesn't do it for himself. He does it to feed his starving friend, Black George. This sets up the moral complexity of trespassing for a higher good.
Right, okay.
Second, it operates economically. Men like Square and Thwackum are constantly trying to poach Bridget's wealth through marriage. Blifil is dedicating his life to poaching Tom's rightful inheritance through lies.
Ah, I see. Third, it operates morally. All of these characters are constantly trying to poach influence over Squire Allworthy's mind, trespassing on his judgment to twist his authority to their advantage. But fourth, and most profoundly, it operates on the level of gender. The patriarchal society is in a constant state of poaching on women's private space. Men in this novel are perpetually invading women's rooms, surveilling their conversations, and trying to control their physical bodies and social autonomy. Women are treated as enclosed estates to be poached upon.
And the ultimate subversion of this entire patriarchal poaching ecosystem is the central structural metaphor of the novel, a pregnancy. Bridget's out-of-wedlock pregnancy is the foundational premise of the entire massive book. It represents a total, absolute subversion of traditional marriage and property transfer.
There is this incredible dialogue where Jenny Jones explicitly argues that a solemn private affiance, a secret, true emotional commitment between two people, is morally superior to a legally sanctioned, church-approved but loveless marriage. She is arguing that true morality happens outside the corrupted institutions.
And that subversive out-of-wedlock pregnancy produces Tom. If we step back and look at the macro level of the novel, Tom's bastard status is deeply tied to the theme of national renewal.
Yes.
Look at the 18th century world Fielding has constructed. It is led by a stagnant, dying gentry. Allworthy has no natural, legitimate heir. His nephew Blifil is a corrupt parasite. Squire Western only has a daughter, whom he treats like a hunting dog, meaning his line ends with her marriage.
The aristocratic society is literally dying out.
Yes. So Tom, the illegitimate child, the bastard born of a secret natural union, is the new seed. He is meant to reinvigorate society. Fielding is destroying the orthodox myth that only legitimate aristocratic birth guarantees heroism or social virtue.
Which completely explains Tom's unique affinity for women. The text highlights that Tom treats women as equals. He does not view them through the exploitative, transactional lens of the patriarchy. He learns his empathy, his kindness, and his survival skills from women like Molly and Jenny, which sets him apart from every other male character in the book.
He possesses the purity of a human rather than the socially constructed toxic traits of a male in that era.
But this intense struggle for survival, this quest to renew society, doesn't happen in a void. It is deeply, inextricably tied to where these characters are physically located. The journey in Tom Jones isn't just a fun travelogue. It is a meticulously constructed geographical map of 18th century English morality.
It is essentially a geographical progression of moral complexity.
The novel is cleanly divided into 3 distinct spatial segments, each demanding a completely different moral code to survive. It's structured exactly like a classic video game format.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it.
You have the starting village that the hero inevitably outgrows. Then you have the dangerous overworld where you have to travel and level up your skills. And finally, you reach the final boss castle that tests your ultimate morality and mechanics.
Yes. And just like a boss castle, London is where the mechanics of survival completely change. You can't just brawl your way out of trouble like you do in the starting village. You have to deal with high-level psychological warfare. But let's start at the beginning. The starting village is Somersetshire, the country. This place represents profound stagnation. It is a circular, moribund existence ruled by incredibly narrow perceptions.
Yeah, nothing ever changes there.
Exactly. When the lower classes have a dispute, they settle it in the churchyard with the bloody physical brawl. When the upper classes have a dispute, it's rooted in blind, ignorant prejudice. If Tom and Sophia want any chance at a progressive, equal union, they must escape Somersetshire. It is a dead end.
So they escape onto the road. This is the overworld. The road represents movement, exploration, and the vibrant, chaotic political reality of England at large. It is rough, jolting, and highly dangerous.
Where you level up.
Exactly. This is where the isolation of the country shatters. Tom encounters soldiers marching to the Jacobite rebellion, greedy innkeepers, gypsies, and highwaymen. It's where the actual pulsating life of the nation is happening. It is a place of profound transition where characters are severely tested and forced to adapt their morality to survive.
And finally, they reach the boss castle. London, the city. London represents moral degradation, political intrigue, and rigid class conflict. We see this violent clash between the country squire, Western, and the sophisticated city lord, Fellamar.
London is just brutal.
It is a cynical, freezing cold environment. The polite society here operates on a level of accepted, institutionalized hypocrisy that is infinitely more sinister than anything seen in the country.
The text highlights this incredible contrast to prove this point. Back on the road, at the Upton Inn, there is a terrifying moment where Tom is led to believe he might have accidentally committed incest with Mrs. Waters.
Oh, that scene is wild.
It is a moment rooted in genuine mythic horror. Everyone reacts with visceral, natural disgust. But contrast that with London. In London, Lady Bellaston carries on calculated, predatory, destructive affairs, and it is just considered the normal, polite way of the world. No one blinks an eye.
Fielding is arguing that London's accepted, polite hypocrisy is far more sinful and destructive to the human soul than accidental incest. The possibility of a happy, comic resolution becomes extremely narrow in London. The city nearly destroys Tom entirely because natural goodness is useless against organized, polite malice.
So what is the takeaway from this map? Fielding is writing a political prescription. He isn't just writing an entertaining fiction, he's demanding a synthesis. He wants the natural vigor and spontaneity of the country to merge with the intellectual daring of the road in order to wipe out the suffocating cynicism of the city. He is demanding an entirely new social order.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Fielding does not just let the reader sit back, eat popcorn, and watch this geographical journey unfold passively.
No, he doesn't.
He constantly interrupts the story. He utilizes a highly specific, highly intrusive, and frankly sometimes frustrating narrative strategy. The narrator of Tom Jones is perhaps the most important character in the book.
Yeah, he's always there.
He is omnipotent, highly conscious, and wears what critics call a serious comic mask.
He intentionally shatters the reader's immersion. There are 18 introductory chapters 1 at the beginning of each book of the novel. Modern readers, and even some critics, absolutely hate them.
They really do.
They call them extraneous, they complain that they slow down the plot, and they just want to get back to the action. Why did Fielding include them if they kill the pacing?
Because for Fielding, pacing is secondary to education. He saw himself as an educator of the public mind. He uses these essays with titles like Of the Serious in Writing or A Farewell to the Reader to meticulously prepare the reader's common sense.
Right.
He is giving you the intellectual tools you need to accurately judge the characters in the following chapters.
Right.
He doesn't want you to just feel for the characters. He wants you to analyze them.
He also throws in massive, seemingly completely unrelated detours right in the middle of the plot. The most famous is the Man of the Hill episode.
Oh, this one is polarizing.
Very. Tom and his companion are traveling, and they meet this old man living in isolation. The narrative completely stops so this old man can tell them his entire miserable life story. He was betrayed by his brother, he traveled to Oxford, then to London, then all over Europe, and he ultimately came to the despairing conclusion that mankind is a vile animal. So he chose total, utter isolation from humanity.
And many readers ask, why risk boring the audience? Why halt the momentum of this epic road trip for a massive, depressing monologue? Why not just show us Tom learning a lesson through action instead of having an old man lecture him on a hill for chapters on end?
Exactly. You're in the middle of this high-stakes chase to find Sophia, and suddenly you're reading a 30-page biography of a guy you just met. Why do that?
Because it is exactly this kind of inclusion that elevates the novel into an epic, as the critic William Empson argued. Fielding isn't just writing a rom-com about a boy getting a girl. He's attempting a comprehensive survey of all human experience. The Man of the Hill is the keystone of the novel's ethical architecture. He represents the absolute extremes of human degradation and philosophical misanthropy.
And crucially, Tom rejects it. The old man says humanity is universally evil and not worth saving, and Tom vehemently pushes back. He argues that you cannot judge the whole human species by its worst individuals. He refuses to give up on the world.
This highlights a vital 60-year generational gap. The old man lived through the bitter, bloody turmoil of the late 17th century, the civil wars, the betrayals. His logical response is withdrawal and despair.
Yeah.
Tom represents the optimistic, participatory, interventionist spirit of the new 18th century. Tom chooses to remain in the world despite its cruelty to try and make it better.
The narrator breaks the spell of the story because passive consumption of a plot doesn't teach morality. If you just get lost in the romance and the sword fights, you aren't thinking critically. The narrator forces active, alienated judgment.
They're quite modern, really.
It's almost like a Brechtian alienation effect, centuries before Brecht. There is this amazing quote where the narrator just flat out asserts his supreme authority over the reader. I am in reality the founder of a new province of writing, so I am at liberty to make what laws I please therein.
He is literally telling the reader, my house, my rules. Stop daydreaming and pay attention to the argument I am making.
And because Fielding broke all the rules of traditional storytelling, because he demanded this active intellectual engagement instead of just providing passive entertainment, critics have been fighting a bloody war over this book for nearly 300 years.
Oh, the critical reception is a bloodbath.
Where a critic stands on Tom Jones often reveals exactly what kind of ideological society they belong to. The historical reception is a roller coaster. Samuel Johnson, the great heavyweight 18th century critic, absolutely hated it.
He despised it.
He called it a corrupt and dangerous work. He vastly preferred the deep, moralistic, psychological letters of Samuel Richardson's novels. Johnson famously said the difference between Richardson and Fielding was the difference between a man who knew how a watch was made, meaning he understood the deep inner psychological workings of a person, and a man who just looked at the dial plate to tell the time. He thought Fielding was completely superficial.
But then you have the romantics like Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who worshipped it. Coleridge called the plot of Tom Jones one of the 3 most perfect ever planned in human history.
High praise.
And later, the great Victorian novelist George Eliot revered Fielding. She called him a colossus, saying that modern writers merely walk under his huge legs.
But the study guide points out something really troubling about modern Western criticism of the book. Over the 20th century, Western critics have essentially neutered the novel. R.S. Crane looks at it purely as a material system of action meant to generate comic pleasure, completely ignoring the biting social critique.
Yeah, William Empson defends the novel's habitual double irony.
Wait, let's unpack habitual double irony so it's clear for anyone studying for the exam.
Empson means that Fielding will set up a joke at the expense of a foolish character, which makes the reader feel smart. But then, Fielding immediately flips the context, revealing that the reader's own assumptions are just as foolish as the characters. The irony cuts both ways, destabilizing the reader's arrogance.
Right, which is brilliant, but even Empson completely misses the violent class antagonisms driving the plot. Middle to Murray focuses on Tom's sexual ethic as a purely individualistic quirk. Ian Watt criticizes the lack of psychological depth, calling the social order of the book static.
It feels like Western critics only want to talk about the mechanics of the jokes and the plot, ignoring the raging fire underneath.
This raises a massive pivotal question, which the study guide addresses by introducing a radical shift in perspective. It introduces the third world, or post-colonial perspective. The academic text argues that readers from ex-colonies, specifically places like India, shouldn't read this book through the sanitized lens of modern Western art for art's sake criticism.
And we are, of course, impartially reporting what this study guide outlines here.
Right, wait. How does a book about an 18th century English country squire who likes to hunt and drink become a manual for dismantling colonialism in 20th century India? Walk me through that connection, because that is a massive leap.
It is a massive leap, but structurally it aligns perfectly. Think about the power dynamics of colonialism. You have an entrenched, hypocritical establishment that claims to rule by divine right or superior morality. In the novel, this is Squire Allworthy, Squire Western, and the London elite.
Okay.
In the colonial context, this is the imperial administration. This establishment relies on rigid, fake moral dogmas and corrupt legal mechanics, represented by Square, Thwackum, and Blifilith, to justify dispossessing the natural, rightful inheritor of the land.
So Tom, the bastard who is cast out, stripped of his rights, and criminalized for just trying to exist naturally, becomes the colonized subject.
Yeah, precisely. From a post-colonial perspective, Tom Jones is a deeply relevant text about dismantling orthodoxies. It's not just a quaint English comedy of manners. It exposes the stagnation, the hypocrisy, and the fundamental illegitimacy of an entrenched establishment.
Wow.
It becomes the story of a dispossessed, marginalized individual absolutely refusing to accept the fate dictated to him by the elite power structures.
So what does this all mean? That is wild. An Indian student reading this in the 1970s doesn't see a funny story about a misunderstanding at an inn. They see a mirror of a rigid colonial power structure using fake morality to steal from the natives.
Yes.
And the text points out that modern capitalist criticism often shies away from this ruthless questioning of power centers. By focusing merely on the mechanics of the plot or the cleverness of the irony, Western critics neutralize the book's political teeth. They make it safe.
And we most impartially report what the source text highlights here. Fielding explicitly requires the reader to objectively look at how he mocks the sanctimoniousness of established institutions. He even targets established Christianity in England, exposing the hypocrisy of characters who use religion as a mask to hide their cruelty, greed, and lust for power.
That was incredibly dangerous to write at the time.
It shows his absolute fearlessness as a social critic. He wasn't just writing to entertain the masses. He was writing to expose the rot in the very foundation of his society's institutions.
Okay, let's take a breath and recap this massive, incredible journey we've just been on. We started with the birth of the prose novel, a brand new medium demanded by our rising middle class, specifically driven by women managing commerce, who wanted media reflecting their pragmatic, gritty lives rather than abstract poetry.
We examine the rigid, suffocating hierarchies of the 18th century and the profound, desperate feminist struggles of characters like the brilliantly manipulative Bridget Allworthy and the tragically degraded Jenny Jones.
We traverse the meticulously constructed geographical moral maps of Fielding's England, from the stagnant, violent country to the dangerous transitional road to the hypocritical, cynical city of London.
And we unpack the radical, world-shifting narrative techniques, the highly intrusive narrator, the philosophical detours like the Man of the Hill that actively force readers to judge their world.
It is a technique that resonates across centuries and continents, offering a literal blueprint for dismantling corrupt orthodoxies, whether you are in 1740s London or 1940s India.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought, something for you to mull over long after you finish studying this text and close the book. If Fielding used the novel to intentionally break the spell of passivity, to force his readers to wake up, feel uncomfortable, and critically judge the hypocrisy of their institutions, what does our modern obsession with purely psychological, highly subjective, deeply immersive fiction say about us? Have we lost the courage to judge our society as a whole, retreating entirely into the safety and isolation of our own individual minds?
That is a question that sticks with you. Fielding forces us to look at the murky, complex reality of the human condition, demanding that we actively judge the systems that govern us, rather than just passively consume a story. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Tom Jones. Keep questioning the narratives around you, keep looking beneath the surface, and we will catch you next time.